one for Raimundo, but I can
Sì, molto
ask
piacere.
when you visit.
Sì, me lo cavo.
Stay here. I can ask if you
Sì, parlo in italiano.
Can I look at it?
yeah, you can look at it.
Because this is exactly what I was arguing for. You have to do these sorts of things where you have some kind of a ranking rating. And the reason I say that is it would be great to have an annual award for cities that meet these criteria.
Yeah.
And I have a friend, do you know the name Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yes, I know him.
You know
He's
him
your friend?
personally?
No,
Oh.
I know him from
No,
television.
I don't know him personally, but the man
Sì,
who
volentieri.
manages his entire operation, his foundation, is a close good friend of mine.
Oh, that's
And we
great.
have been discussing this possibility, so this is something that didn't directly into my day once, that you might want to look
Oh, perfect. I'll ask my colleague.
at. Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
So just give me yours.
Oh, really?
Bring it
You
me
sure?
once. Yeah.
Where are you from, by the way?
I'm from Amsterdam.
Amsterdam. Oh,
Yeah, so I explained to you what it is.
that's why your English is so good.
No, it's not that good. It's not that good, but so far so good. Yeah? So we say we have people, planet, profit, and we have a sustainable mobility index. But before we also had a sustainable cities index and a water index. So this is on mobility. And then we rank all the cities on that criteria. And in the back you see here where it comes from. And so highest weighting, lowest weighting, all the criteria. The people indicator, planet indicator, profit indicator. And we use trustful resources and sources.
Now, do you come out with like a yearly book about all of this, or journal or magazine?
No,
or
this is it.
This is it.
And there was the former one, the Sustainable Cities Index. This is the water index.
I've heard about this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And the other thing though is that where are you going with the project? With these
We go
ratings?
to our clients, so for example to Milan or Rome, right? Because and then we say, okay,
Okay, got it.
you can improve on this, you can improve on that. So this is Europe, so we have here Milan. So Milan, for example, can improve the bicycles. Rome is number 14,
Yeah,
can improve on profits.
are you in the U.S.?
Yes, we have US, but we focus Europe on Europe. But here we have the ranking. US is not doing so well because the public transport is not.
Plus, plus, plus. Very bad. I call it the developing country.
Yeah.
People that don't like to say it.
No. Where are you from?
Originally from Connecticut, East Coast.
New York. 23, Vancouver 28.
I lived in San Francisco for a long time.
Oh.
It should be higher than Los Angeles.
Let's have a look, because we have some case studies as well.
San Francisco is actually a great
Automotive. Aviation, of course.
Now, you are in Amsterdam itself?
Yep.
Have you heard of a company called Honergy? It's in Amsterdam.
Honergy? No.
Hanurgy.
Brisbane, Sydney. They're big in Australia as well. Zurich is always topping profit first. Paris is amazing overall. It's a third. That's in a way crazy because always gets topping metallic. Here's Amsterdam, and there you always have the green and bicycles, of course. Planet is.
When I lived in Denmark, I lose my bicycle.
Yeah.
In LA, it's like I lose my car.
Rotterdam, Sao Paulo, Jeddah, New York, Chicago. Yeah. 49, not that good. LA, I think San Francisco is not maybe next year.
Should be in.
It should be in there. But in fact, these are all the cities where we are very present. In some cases. And here you can. Oh yeah, this again. What is very important for a scientist. So that's it.
And you're also doing Asia, so in Singapore.
Yes,
You have other cities
Singapore.
in China too.
Yeah, Singapore, Beijing, Shanghai.
It's great. Thank you for this.
Yeah.
Back to Los Angeles. Give you a quiz.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
I give you a quiz.
You need this to show people.
They will bring to other
Oh, I
things.
see.
Because my colleagues are there in the first round. Now that I'm here, so.
Thank you so much. Oh, I don't need. No, I don't. No, I don't need sugar. That's okay. No. I want to recycle it. So. Thank you. I need that cup of coffee.
So.
Hi. Hi, I'm Rudy Clark. What's your name? From where? Give you my card. By the way, if anybody sends me an email saying, "Call me Woody," you got me wrong.
Dr. Clark.
Yeah, I tell people that because it happens all the time. Yeah, no, but you're right. Is one of your criteria for cities their source of energy, like solar or wind versus?
Yeah, maybe it's in it.
Is there?
Maybe we will.
I'm so glad to meet you. I know about it.
Yeah, because what are you publishing next year?
Well, this one book on land preservation. I'm going to say a couple of things about it, but the point is, it's sort of a way to deal with Donald Trump. The second book is on an update of my book that I did on qualitative economics. Have you ever heard of qualitative economics? Are you ready for this, right? This is, what's up? A glass of wine or something?
No. Qualitative economics.
Yeah. I
Uno di 30 di questo mi scrivo. Ok, no.
Well, I, as you know, so they sort of said, there's actually a company that makes it also take solar, test them. Where's that from? I'm gonna go to the bathroom because that's what you're your first name again is
Caroline.
Caroline.
It's in the book.
But on this we have to go as out too, right?
Why is that?
Talk about the find out if you have it too, right?
Yeah.
I just want to find out.
Yep.
Born. This is the
Police form, yeah.
yeah. Born in these dates. And resident in nothing.
And down here,
Firma means signature. This is your signing here. Okay?
I sign here or print my name too. I have to print
I think I actually don't know. I just signed here.
Oh, yeah, great. That's great. I'm happy. Just take it on speaker. Great, thank you. Maybe. I lost my name. Maybe I...
I'm right back. Did you get your form on that?
Where do I put my name?
They told me,
Amsterdam,
yeah.
my name.
No, your name goes down. You did that. Okay, now here what they want is where you're born and your date of birth.
Allora, iniziamo fra 5 minuti, ricordo per chi non ha preso la cuffia e per caso non parlasse il cinese, oltre che l'inglese, è importante prendere la cuffia qui, grazie.
That's it. Creative, huh?
Dico qual è la password. Yes, we give this for the... I have a problem for lunch today. The journalists, they want to interview me from Italian television. So I'm very sorry. But there are a lot of meetings from 2 o'clock. So we have to meet in Rome.
So yeah, we talked about that like for around lunchtime Monday.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll double.
Let's do that.
Okay, but on this, do I give this?
I don't know. Just keep it there and then somebody will come.
All right, I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. Okay, now I'm going to the bathroom.
Chinese is okay? Yes. Yeah, you have a,
We have translation.
you have translation.
Otherwise, it would be a problem.
Or Italian. Okay, cool. Yeah. Cool. So sorry, you see the no taxi this morning, so we wait a long time.
We are all handy here, and we know that we have to start very early. There is a huge io dove c'è?
Shake hands.
Uh,
Grazie, grazie molte.
Lei è americano?
No, lei è il capo della parte dei progetti speciali della parte strategica di Novos, quindi
Noi stiamo cominciando, partiamo. Ok? Era solo per dirlo, ok?
Se ci sediamo, iniziamo i lavori.
I suggest to start the session.
Intanto un'informazione di servizio già è stata.
Let me remind you that there will be presentations in both English and Chinese, and so whoever would like to rely on simultaneous translation, you can find headsets at the desk.
Just paperwork. Totally. I don't know. I don't think it's very important. Allora, buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everybody. I suggest to start. Don't want to be too late. Our international guests know that Italian time is not always very, very accurate, but so let us get started. Good morning, I'm Roberto Giovannini for La Stampa newspaper. Please take your headsets for simultaneous translation. And let me also add that you can also follow the discussion on Facebook streaming. And you can also interact with channel, writing questions, and write questions on Twitter at the hashtag #StatiGreen17. This plenary session is entitled Europe, China, and the US, the future of the green economy in the new world setup. Well, we all know that the green economy is key for decarbonization and the struggle against climate change. It's a global challenge requiring a global approach, and we know that with the three world players, Europe, China, and the US, in these days, with the presidency of the Fiji Islands in Bonn, you know that the Fiji Islands are threatened. Well, against this background, today's discussion is particularly useful to understand how this challenge will be tackled in the next few years. We know that we have little time at our disposal. The floor to Raimondo Orsini, the Director for the Foundation for Sustainable Development, who coordinated this very important meeting. In the report by the States General, there's a very important international chapter.
I'm the Director of Sustainable Development Foundation, and I have the pleasure today to introduce you to the international part of the report that we have developed for the green economy. Yesterday, we have presented the Italian part, so the policy for the development of the green economy in Italy. Today, as Roberto said, we are talking about the international part, green economy in the world, and particularly in the comparison between US, China, and Europe. A lot of things can be said, but before starting, I would like to thank all the team of the foundation. The report was coordinated by Edo Lonchi, and the international part was coordinated by Tony Federico, who made a great job to do this research. We always talk about the revolution of the green economy. So I've thought about what do we mean about revolution? Is it really a revolution? What does it mean? What does a revolution mean? And I remember that we made in the foundation a nice play, let's say, and we said, have a look, for example, to see what is a revolution. This is a high school classroom in 1967. This is a real picture of Italian high school. Look at how they are dressed, how they look, the length of the skirts of the women, and how they are dressed like. And this is 1967. And this is a classroom in 1969, only 2 years after. Please have a look at how they smile, and how they're differently dressed, and how they differently behave, only 2 years after. And if you're not convinced, look about a music band in 1966. I know they look like me, I look like them, but this is not done by purpose. And this is a rock band in 1969. What happened in only 2 years? There was 1968 in the middle. This was really a revolution. A revolution is something that changes the behaviors and the actions and the thought of people. So what we've done in the foundation is we collected the cover pages of The Economist of the early 90s. You see, financial risk, how to privatize, shareholder values. These were typically the contents of The Economist and the economy of a few years ago. And what's happening now? These are some cover pages of The Economist. The works lungs, forest, and how to save them. Stopping climate change, happiness, and how to measure it. So we can say that a revolution is happening when the world of economy, like it happened in the green economy, is including these concepts and ideas into the normal language. And we are very proud that we have this list of speakers today that will tell us more about what's happening. So, to give you an introduction about the state of the green economy in the world, what is written in our report, we start from Europe. We always say that Europe was a forerunner, it started as a first in terms of CO2 emissions, for example. But if we study the targets that have been set by Europe for 2030, and we know that Monica Tassoni will tell us more about this, and if you see the trajectories of the emissions and the target of minus 40% in 2030, we can say that we can possibly not meet in Europe the target if we don't raise the ambitions on the target for energy efficiency and renewable energies. They don't fit with the target of 40% in 2030. So what we said in the report is that the European Union will not, can miss the leadership, can miss the idea of being a locomotive if it has no ambition, it doesn't raise the ambition. That's what France and Germany is pushing for, and that this is what Italy will push for too, hopefully. I don't know, Monica, if you will agree, but we'll say later on about what's happening in Brussels. And we are waiting for a very important directive, the adoption from Europe on the waste management and circular economy. Simona Bonafè yesterday was with us, telling us that it will be ready by the end of the year. This is very important. And if you see the resource productivity and the GDP and the internal consumption of materials, Europe is doing very well. If you see the internal consumption, the red line, the performance is very good. But even there, we have to raise our ambitions and targets. So the message for Europe is, don't stop, don't sleep on your laurels. You have to do more if you don't want to miss the battle. When we go to China, and when we think about China, we know that China grew up and it became the top world greenhouse gas emitter, 29% of CO2 world emissions. And what is even more important, the emissions per capita of Chinese are higher than Europe. This means that the economy has grown and they are facing the problem that Europe was facing a few years ago. But on the other hand, China is willing to change. China is diminishing coal use and renewable energy is terribly increasing in China. And I have been personally invited to the Chinese conference of electric car. It was incredible to see how much they are investing on electric cars and renewables and accumulations. There are companies, and we have some of them here with us today, producing 100,000, 200,000 electric vehicles per year and 100,000, 200,000 of electric buses per year. Okay? But on the other hand, some recent studies tell us that the emissions, the CO2 emissions from China that started to be flat in the last 2 years, maybe could reduce the growth even before 2030. So the ambitions and the planet and the plan they gave to Paris can be reached even before, but they have to decide it internally in China too. If you see the consumption in China, the red of the last 15 years, if you see the red one is coal, oil, gas, nuclear, hydro, and renewables, and you see the growth from 2010 to 2015, renewables grew in China more in the last 5 years than any other source. So we can see real sign of greening the economy in China very fastly. And we will listen to the Chinese representative today to see which are the Chinese plans for the next years. So if you see the emissions, total emissions of China compared with the total emission of USA and Europe and India, you can see this incredible raise and boost, but as you can see, they are flat, stable since the last 2 years. This is a very positive sign. We hope that this will continue and even go down for the next decades. Now we go to the very sexy part of the topic, because I have to say, Roberto, everybody's waiting to talk about Trump. In all our conferences, in all our workshops, the main message was what's happening now with Trump and what's happening to the United States. This will change the balance in the world of the green economy. Well, this may change, but our perception when we made these studies that so far This decision, this political decision by Trump, declared unfortunately in Italy, in Taormina, is not affecting the growth of the green economy. There are many states, single states, who allied in the US Climate Alliance, deciding to have targets more ambitious and to respect the Paris Agreement. There are many cities in the Conference of Mayors, represented 1,400 cities, saying that they want higher targets of greenhouse gas emission than the Paris Agreement. This means that something can happen in the States, that the political decision that it may stop the green economy doesn't affect the growth of the green economy, because green economy is decided also at state level, at a city level. So we have to see what's happening, but our perception is that the improvement of the United States, you can see the emissions per dollar and the emissions per capita are improving in the States. The red line is GDP, the blue line is the population, the green line is the GDP, the blue line is the population, the red line is the emission per capita, and the last one is the emission per dollar in the GDP. US can continue to improve, but of course, Trump's decision may slow down this process. We have Woody Clark with us. He will tell us more about the effects, the possible effects. What we have seen, and this you know, it's the electricity and the energy mix in general in the United States. We have an improvement in the last few years, in 10 years, 2007 on the left, 2016 on the right, the improvement of renewables, the decrease of coal, and the increase of gas. This is helping the decarbonization of the American economy. And what is very important is that the total energy consumption remain more or less the same. So they are not consuming more. They should consume less, but at least they are not consuming more. So renewable energy in US are growing. Solar and wind energy are exceeded 10% of electricity production in US in April 2017. They are leader in biofuels production. They are leaders in energy efficiency technology. The green bonds emissions, so talking about finance, the green bonds emissions were 80 times higher in 2016 than in 2012. And when the finance world moves, this means that something may happen in the real economy, or vice versa. So Trump's position may be an isolated position, because United States is the only country that is going to the other direction for the Paris Agreement. So this may be isolated position at political level. So the government may rethink a negotiation in the Paris Agreement. Very quickly, have a look at the world. This is the renewable energy growth in the world from 2000 to 2015. Energy, total energy, not only electricity, the growth is very high, 10%. And as you can see, we are reaching 10%, but we're starting in 2000 with less than 4%. Very quick growth of renewable energy in the world. And very quick growth of electric cars in the world. The stock of electric cars is increasing a lot. We are still very small numbers, but it's increasing in a very, very quick time and in a very quick way. So the International Energy Agency assessed 26 technologies, and they decided that renewable energies, electric vehicles, electric storage are growing at a good pace. So good. Smile. Then energy saving and efficiency, they have to grow more. And what is most important in the world is to replace coal. Coal is still 40% of the energy in the world. So we depend on coal in the world by 40%, and it's the highest source of energy production. This is one of our main challenges in the world. And of course, we need to replace the biofuel with new generation biofuel and energy consumption in the building sector. So to conclude my presentation, I give you an overlook of the technologies. Something strange is happening. We have some companies that are making a lot of money, incredible lot of money, but without having physical assets. Bitcoin, Uber, Facebook, Alibaba, Airbnb, they don't have real physical assets. They invest in digitalization and connection. What is very important, we have to investigate if digitalization and connection and IT is helping or not helping the green economy. And we have to do a study case by case at world level. Tesla is the world's fourth largest automaker by value. So it's almost like Daimler and Toyota, but they only produce 76,000 vehicles. Only with 76,000 vehicles, they are considered the fourth largest producer in terms of value, or money, or capitalization. Why? Because people believe in electric car, because politicians believe in the electric car, and so Tesla is benefiting from a vision more than from a production and a price. We have seen electric buses. This is Paris, as you can see from the rain, but we have also electric buses. We have seen it in Marseille and in many European cities, 100% electric. But we can also have some nicer way of having circular economy and new technology. Reuse and repair is growing in Europe and outside Europe. So I wish that you can read our report. Unfortunately, it's in Italian, but we have a summary in English. But to conclude my introduction, I want to tell you about a guy that was called Colonel Albert Hope. This guy was an American guy who invested all his money in electric car, and it was 1901. And he decided to build 500 electric cars with his money. And then this was a model, not exactly like one of the last ones, but this is very nice. And what his colleagues told him is, why do you spend all your money in electric car? Why, now that the oil industry is coming? And he said, it's clear. It's because it's cleaner, it's less noisy, and I'm sure that nobody will want to see a top-line explosion. They will prefer electricity. So what happened? He was the right person with the right idea in the wrong moment. We think that for the green economy, now we have the right persons with the right idea, and this is the right moment. Thanks very much.
Grazie Raimondo. Speriamo sia veramente il momento giusto. Se è il momento giusto lo capiremo.
I don't know whether it is the right moment, but we will understand it. And we will see what happens in these three geopolitical centers. And now Monica Tassoni, who will tell us, can Europe make it to increase this thrust, or is it a flat situation? My name is Monica Frassoni, President of the European Green Party. I would like to thank all of you for the invitation this morning. I was sorry for not being there yesterday, but I think that this kind of events that are so wide-ranging, relevant, important, regular, are extremely important. Also to find some, cooperation and synergism among those who believe that that shouldn't just concern Europe, but the whole planet. I would like to subdivide my presentation into two parts, and I would like to therefore tell you that the EU is lagging behind a bit more than a few years ago, not just in terms of the green economy policies, but also with reference to believing or not that EU can become a change maker from an economic energy point of view to fight against climate change and to change our economic system and our social system as well. There are two or three main reasons underlying the EU policies, and there is something that is missing. First of all, the fact that the EU, as everybody knows, has lost its power, its charisma, its legitimacy as a fundamental actor as a leader, not just in the economic sector, but also vis-à-vis the European citizens. There is a crisis going on, and for a green economy to occur, which is a broad agenda, the fact that it doesn't have a cross-border and supranational subject that is strong and motivated, able to have a true impact at a global level, that is a problem. The fact that in terms of integration, unitary tools are now slowing down and less effective and strong than a few years ago when it comes to the EU. That also slows down the whole common action, joint action undertaken by the EU. The second, and this is not just a question of institutional operation, not only that, but it is something related to authoritativeness, credibility, and also self-confidence, being confident that it can change things. And then a second issue is a political issue. We're not here to do any politics, but since the important changeover with Barroso, after Barroso Commission a few years ago, the trend of the EU went towards a revival of fossil fuel sectors in terms of advocacy, but also in terms of credibility of EU institutions. And by that, I mean that green agendas, even though, as I said, over the past 15 years, we have not talked about wishful thinking, but we do talk about a true economic sector, the green sector, green economy sector, which is there. And those who do represent these sectors have found it very hard and difficult, much more so than it should, and the whole process has slowed down. And this has important political repercussions. If you observe how the EU Parliament and the Council of Ministers that are in charge of lawmaking at an EU level, and over the past 2-3 years, since 2016, Energy for All package and Circular Economy package, which are the two beacons in the lawmaking work of the EU over the past 2 years, you can see that the things that had been acquired in the first package, the 2020 package, they are much more complicated now. A very quick example. Renewables in 2007-2008, that was something very complicated, but a few important objectives were achieved in lawmaking which are no longer possible now, and that do engender an important problem in going on with our work as against that point in time. The fact of having lost the possibility, and I mean the legislative procedure is not completed and concluded yet as for the renewable energies, the fact that we don't have a serious target. 27% is not serious for energy efficiency. We are almost at the level as business as usual, and we've missed this opportunity of making certain thresholds and targets legally binding at a national level, and that reduce the possibility for the EU to have an impact as a change maker, as was true between 2007 and 2008. That doesn't mean that over the next few years we won't have a revival and a renewed interest in renewables. That doesn't mean that nothing will be done on that, because as against the US, there is an inertia that didn't exist in around 2000. So there is the need and urge to act on the part of policymakers, and if this is lacking now, is because of a slowdown and a flat situation and lack of awareness of the urging situations among the politicians at a European level, and the way in which lobbies and advocacy groups are organized in Brussels, we can realize that there is a true emergency which is powerful, that was not there before, of a part of the economic sector which is highly represented here, which is a green economy sector, which is a radical point that makes a difference as against 2017-2008, when the presence of the manufacturing world was absolutely the one of the energy intensive ones, or almost of the industry that didn't have a special interest in this agenda. Hence, I do believe that the ability by the EU to be at the forefront and to really be a leader to meet Paris obligations, that has slowed down, that has been slowed down by the political situation that exists, since the parliament is a democratic institution and we have to come to grips to it. And the fact that the economic sector and associations are duly represented and try and speak up loud, and they are much more organized than previously, that is our strength and that is our source of hope and promise. And also because that can really highlight the evidence that is in front of everybody's eye with reference to the various parties. And then there is also a certain nationalistic jealousy, something that should that requires our full attention. I don't know whether things will change by next year. There has been a discussion that has been going concerning what European brings us, what it can give us, how much money we should give and should receive back. This kind of trading is a type of trading that exists at all levels, and especially at climate and energy level. There is a sort of trading, okay, you do too much or do too little. This is something that is devastating in the legislative discussion, and the lack and absence of this sense of belonging to Europe is a problem, and is something to be reconquered. It is, I mean, we shouldn't be too pessimistic, and I don't want to fall into depression, but there is a clear crisis in terms of the EU, because it is just seen in terms of the bias and vested interest of the various countries. So this is an important issue, so that when we discuss of risk preparedness, or when we talk about energy supply and of how markets are organized, energy markets are organized, and how I can get some help from France, for example, and have an interconnection target, so that Spain, which has an overproduction of renewables, can go through France by so these discussions are typical at a European intergovernmental level, and every country is absolutely jealous of one's prerogatives, of one's own sovereignty, even though we are all in the 2017, when the climate change is there and emergency is there. And in spite of that, that is the situation. Another important division is the East-West division. If you look at the Index for Economic Doctrine of 2016, you can read that the most advanced countries in a green economy, you have the Northern European countries and Austria, and last ranking countries are the ones from Southern and Eastern Europe. So within Europe, you've got different poles and huge differences in the ways in which the various countries manage green economy, and this has an important impact in the way in which these countries act within the European Union. Does it mean that we are lost, that we have no possibility to act? No, we shouldn't be pessimistic, because as Ramonto said, if you realize there are citizens with great awareness, making sure that the EU is active in these green economy sectors like energy efficiency, but not only that. And it should be said that at European level, a big work is done by stakeholders involved. So Italy is a unique case in Europe. There should be further widespread, because I think that there is a lack of knowledge, of data. This is not true for Italy, but in other countries there is a lack of knowledge, and so that makes action difficult. A second part in my presentation, very rapidly, concerns the themes, the issues that are relevant for us to define our action capabilities vis-à-vis climate change and more generally concerning green agenda. And I think that the most interesting thing of all is that these are the same themes that we find in the Italian political agenda, like land use and the retention of soil, soil quality protection, food safety protection. You know that in Eastern Europe, a few brands use different ingredients than in other countries, which is a scandal. And that is also true for organic products, whereas the EU should guarantee the quality and the quality standards of agriculture and of food. So these are a few examples of important themes to be addressed. And then green finance, where you have priorities with a whole series of operators, of businessmen, practitioners, local stakeholders who say, we don't have the money, there is a lack of money, we don't have the resources, we cannot change things, and we cannot implement projects because we cannot fund them. I'm talking of green investment. And then there is a whole set of operators talking with banks, and banks say, we've got the money. The point is that we don't have the projects. And if you talk with the EU Commissioner for Structural Funds for Environment, that's what they tell us. Well, we are concerned, preoccupied that the quality of projects is insufficient. You either have lack of projects, but if these projects are not really eligible because of a very poor quality, and that is a big problem concerning private investment as well as public investment. So I think that this is another serious topic on which there is this twofold problem of lack of projects or poor quality projects, but on the other hand, the rules of the EU are so complicated in terms of resource management, and also the EU Parliament is responsible for such a complexity, but that is a long story and I cannot tell it to you now. And so I think that this issue does require the ability to see that Europe can change things through one's own commitment, because these issues are totally priority issues, and therefore I think that we have the possibility for the EU to become a leader, a mindset change maker, because it believes in these issues, and within and without the EU institutions involving economic associations as well. Okay, thank you, Monica. We can have a very short Q&A session. You told us how Europe is working, but so the green economy has a new space, the cities are more active, but we know that politics is decisive. You are co-president of the Green Party at a European level. Can Jamaica help Germany towards this kind of thrust? It can I'm referring to the presence of CDU and the Green Party presence in the German government. It can do so, but provided that Greens are ready to go to government, because they want to go to government and they can play up. They believe they can play a positive role in that. But if you cannot manage to have the four main things you want: carbon, European issue, migration, and carbon tax, even though it has not been explicitly said, I think that if they can obtain that, they are ready to go to government, and it is worthwhile, and they are totally aware of it. Otherwise, that kind of measure won't help anybody. Will be totally insufficient.
Quindi diciamo l'Europa è un punto di domanda.
So Europe is a question mark. We can't be too hopeful. And now I'd like to ask Cao Jianye, the scientific advisor at the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Italy. Well, Raimondo Orsini was drawing our attention on its commitments, and actually China is doing more than it actually committed to do in Paris.
Hello. It's okay. It's working. Good morning. It is my great pleasure to attend today's the event. And first of all, I like to express my apologize for being late today, because you see we stay in the hotel and for almost 1 hour to wait for the taxi. So anyway, it is our
That's us.
Yeah, sorry for that. Since we have the translator, and so I like to speak in Chinese, because in the 非常高兴啊，非常荣幸，有机会呢参加这个今天的这个。
First of all, I'd like to warmly thank the organizers for inviting me.
This kind introduction.
Vorrei ringraziare gli organizzatori, il
Or from the Director General of my friends and Camilla. So now it's working? Now it's working, okay.
We apologize, just a second.
E
Che numero è?
Che numero è il canale?
Cioè il cinese e l'italiano. Facciamo parlare in inglese.
E inglese.
Scusate, risolviamo.
他暂时没翻译，现在是他没翻译，我是用中文。I speak Chinese, not working, but 他没有。
It is working.
Not working?
One second.
Now it's working,
Okay, you speak and then we see if translation comes.
OK，那个翻译现在可以翻译了吗？
Yes, no?
It works, it works, it works. Okay, it works now. Yes, we can hear. Yes, we can hear. Well, let me start again. I'd like to warmly thank the representatives of the Italian government and all the friends who have been supporting the green economy in China. As is well known, during the 19th conference of the People's Republic Party, new important guidelines were set, and our president emphasized several times the importance of a peaceful coexistence between nature and man. And so our people, of course, wants to follow that track in a sustainable way. Our planet is a huge treasure that we need to protect, and of course these policies are key to save resources and to always protect the environment. We will commit ourselves to promoting a suitable production system for the environment and for promoting a green lifestyle. We want to promote a beautiful and happy China. The economy must be a green economy in the future, and we therefore aim at creating the best possible living conditions for our people. And that's one of the pillars of future development.
通过实施创新驱动发展。
And over the past few years, many successes were reached. We reformed the supply side, promoting a stable development of the Chinese economy and reducing energy consumption from 2011 to 2015, with an annual increase equal to 3.6%, which is lower than the GDP increase. if we consider, for example, carbon consumption, well, we know, of course, that that is the main source for environmental pollution. The consumption of carbon is now diminishing, and in parallel, we were able to boost the use of wind energy, solar energy, nuclear energy, and natural gas. And since 2011 and from 11 and 15, the percentage went up from 13% to 17.5%. I'm talking about the use of sustainable energies. And still regarding the protection of the environment, we took steps to meet the needs for a fast growth of sustainable development. The electric cars, the photovoltaic, and systems and wind farms that must give a substantial contribution to development in the future. Therefore, our 2020 objective is a total power of 200 gigawatts, and for photovoltaic systems, 150 gigawatts. While developing the green economy, of course, we have several challenges to tackle. We must overcome the old mindset, which is still very strong. And we, of course, need to improve economic practices. We need further impulses to the market to satisfy the needs of the, let's say, green financial markets and promote the growth of less developed areas. So the green economy model should be spread out to the entire country. The government will step up its policies to drive the economy through the green economy.
继续加强政策引导，加强绿色顶层设计。
China will further strengthen its policies, working at the general framework of the green economy. A decade ago, the government had identified the goals, developing the National Plan on Climate Change, and proceeding along the environmental path with the projects approved by the State Council. So there's a general reform plan which will be followed by the 13th five-year plan for the environment. And for the next few years, we will aim at the development of sustainability, the growth of green infrastructures, green transport, and green housing. And we will build a complete system to protect the natural resources. We will continue to boost green economy technologies to make companies more efficient, fully leveraging the green technologies to enhance the quality of traditional manufacturing and improve business management through a reduction of the greenhouse effect, improving environmental protection, and increasing the use of renewable energies while reducing raw material consumption. So our aim is a sustainable and circular economy. We have promoted pilot projects, zero emission projects, to support all these goals. Sustainable energy is certainly one of the main goals in environmental policies. And based on the supply side structural reform to spread out the green economy, it's important to drive economic growth, reducing losses. We choose highly efficient manufacturers and products, for example, ecological cars and ecological products. And we must commit ourselves more to spreading out the use of electric cars in China, for instance. And for wholesale markets and retail distribution, energy saving should also be boosted, and the marketing of green products. We must leverage innovation, stepping up research, design, and investments in green products. We also promote international cooperation, promoting the approval of international environmental standards. And widening the use of sustainable products and standards. We must use tax tools, also to tax incentives, to increase the percentage of our green products also in foreign trade, in our exports. So the green economy certainly involves many different aspects, including biodiversity, environment, energy, climate changes. What we will need to do in collaboration with the other countries, and the Chinese government, of course, sets great store by collaborating with the other communities, and certainly with the collaboration in Italy was launched a long time ago for the benefit of environmental protection. So we'd like to honor our joint commitments and acknowledge them, acknowledge their success, setting an example at international level. So on the eve of the week devoted to technology and innovation, Italy and China in Beijing, there'll be many seminars, many topics tackled. Clean energies, environmental protection, green chemistry, and B2B meetings between Italian and Chinese companies. In September 2016, the Chinese government adopted the Paris Agreement on Climate Changes, and like Italy, it's one of the most important countries promoting the agreement. So the two governments were the initiators of the work team to tackle the challenges of a smart grid. And I wish further success to Italy and China in the framework of the Paris Agreement to take important steps for a flourishing future. Thank you very much.
Grazie a Cao Giannier. Devo dire, se mi si consente una battuta, quando snocciolava i numeri.
When hearing about facts and figures of his country, I think that we really, Italy, we are lagging behind, and the budget law is really impressive. Thanks a lot. And now I would like to give the floor to Caroline Gerels, Deputy Minister of Amsterdam, and she works for HD. And to you the floor.
Grazie. Buongiorno tutti. I'm happy.
Good morning.
Very proud that you invited me, and I think it's very important to share knowledge about cities, about mobility, about resiliency, about regeneration. So I have a question for you. Who came by bicycle this morning? I see there's somebody, another one. Yes. I come from Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, 58% of all the people are coming with their bicycle to their job every day. And that's not because we are very tall people, or because we eat a lot of cheese, or we drink a lot of milk. It has to do with the fabric of the city, the structure of the city. It has to do with the history of the city and the policies you make. And it has to do with technology. When you look to Amsterdam, for example, this is Amsterdam, you see that the streets are very narrow. It's in fact a medieval fabric of the city, so it's impossible to have a lot of cars in the historical city center. And as long as the canals are there for more than 400 years, we were obliged to be creative, to be innovative. And that's why we have a very subtle transport system. I will come back to that later. And I will talk about a combination of what is possible when you look to technology and innovation on one hand, and on the other hand, what you can do with policy, with pricing, with taxation and things like that. Succeeva. Maybe just, yes. And I learned what you can do with policy in a city as a vice mayor. I did 2 terms, but then I thought it's also very important that cities learn from each other. So that was my ambition, to get that city-to-city learning. Because we live in a world where urbanization is there. And when you look to the world in 2030, we have a lot of mega cities. And it's very important that we keep the quality of life in the mega cities. And that was why I was so happy that Raimundo invited me here to speak at Ecomundo, because green economy, green cities, is not only about doing good. It has nothing to do with idealistic things in my perspective. It has to do, in the end, with quality of life, with staying wealthy, with economic growth, with business. So green economy is doing business in a very smart way. When we realize that we will live in megacities in 2030, we have to be keen on what the effects are of, for example, carbon pricing. Raimundo talked about carbon, about gas, but I'm sure in the future it will be priced, carbon pricing. We will talk about water pricing and valuing water. You saw the canals of Amsterdam. 50 years ago, when the Beatles were there, it was black water in the canals of Amsterdam. 50 years later, so last year, our Queen is swimming in our canals. We are proud of that, but it's also part of staying attractive as a city. So where is it all about? It is about urbanization, it's about cities that are in competition. For example, here in Rimini, you want to attract businesses, you want to have a flourishing economy, not only in the summer along the beach, but also in the winter, so that the hotels have their business. So you have to stay competitive as a city. Because cities are business hubs and cities are emotional attachment areas. So we face enormous challenges, and that's the reason why our company, Arcadis, is making a sustainable city index every 2 years, and we compare 100 cities on sustainability. And there we say it's important to balance the 3 competing priorities of people, planet, and profit, and I'm sure you know them all. So it's not only about planet, it's also about profit for your economic growth, as I said. And the research scope is rich. We have 20 indicators. We compare them. You can download the reports. And it's about education, it's about work-life balance, about crime, but also, of course, about energy, green spaces, air pollution, and so on. Well, it's a very smart overall ranking. And here you see, for example, that Rome is doing well, 22, Milan is on number 40. And the idea is of this comparison that we inspire city leaders to be innovative, to be creative, to understand the context of their own city, to improve on people, planet, profit, to improve on, in the end, quality of life. So this is Europe in the spotlight. When you compare the different European cities, you come to new ideas. For example, Zurich tops the index because they are very innovative. They have a technical university that's world famous. They have a very good transport system. They have clean air, but they have also a very innovative climate. For example, Google, Apple, they're all in Zurich. And then after the Sustainable Cities Index and its success in 2016, so last year, we made a new index and it was published last week. And it's about mobility. So it's about airports, it's about train systems, it's about bicycle infrastructure. And there you see, for example, Hong Kong is doing well. I'm not sure if you have been there, but they have a wonderful bullet train to the airport. They have a wonderful metro system. They have a lot of infrastructure also for bicycles. So they can be an example for the growing cities in that part of the world, as Zurich is an example for us. And for example, I'm sure Beijing is aware of the idea of carbon pricing, water pricing, so they will double their metro system in 5 years, in the next 5 years. So it's impressive what is happening in the world, and I think for policy leaders, for city leaders, it's important that you get inspired by other cities and ideas for your own Rimini, for example. So when you put Europe in the spotlight, you see here that Milan is on number 18, Rome is on number 40. So they're doing well, but they can do better. For example, when you introduce electric vehicles, as we did in Amsterdam, or when you improve your bicycle infrastructure. And there again, we see the balance between policy, pricing on one hand, and being creative, innovative, and using engineering skills and technology skills. And at the end of the day, it's of course about the people. As I said, cities are in competition. When the air is not clean, where there's no water anymore, people will disappear. And I'm here in Italy. I'm a fan of Italy, as most Dutch are. And I always explained that at the end of the day, it's very important that the people in your city are happy. And I'm sure you know who painted this. It's Ambrogio Lorenzetti, 600 years ago. This is the city hall of Siena in Tuscany. And the artwork is called Allegories of Good and Bad Government. I'm sure you know it all. It's one of my favorite artworks because here you see metaphors of what is good and what is bad. And in the end, of course, the Italians conclude that where arts and culture are flourishing, the people are happier. So when we bring it back to my city, we say this is Spinoza, our most famous philosopher, 1650, something like that, born exactly here along the canals. But the purpose of the city is freedom. But it can be only freedom when there's a balance between the individual benefits and the collective ambitions and results. So when you are a leader in a city, or when you are a decision maker in a company, or when you're a responsible citizen, you know exactly where your freedom starts and where it ends, and that you have to be responsible for the rest of your city as well and for the future. And that is why I said, well, we have an endless amount of challenges. There was London, for example. And when you want to really do something, you have to be in balance when we talk about policy and tendering at one hand and permits and taxation at the other hand. So what we did in Amsterdam, for example, was a program that was announced as Fast Lane for a Healthy City. In the historical city center, we doubled the parking taxes. That means that you have to have a lot of courage as a politician. So we did it in the beginning. Otherwise, the people will not be happy. And they complained at the beginning. But after 3 months, everybody was happy. Because the taxes were doubled, but people took their bicycle or the public transport system. And when it's really necessary, they could park. And the money, it was hundreds of millions, we invested in a greener city. So we put trees, we improved the quality of life in the parks, we cleaned more and more the water. So Fast Lane for a Healthy City had benefits for everybody. We did huge investment in bicycle, tram and metro network. Next year the North-South metro will open. It was a headache for the responsible colleague of mine, but at the end of the day it's much better, and it makes the city more healthy, but also accessible for more people, and parts of the city are becoming more and more attractive. When you combine huge investments in infrastructure, the value of the real estate will increase, for example. And that's why I always say public-private partnership is required. For example, when you open the canals in Milan and you develop the waterfronts, the real estate will increase. So developers, investors will be very interested by investing there because the value of their real estate will grow. That's what happened in Amsterdam with waterfront development as well. So that's an opportunity. What we did was a program called Amsterdam Rainproof. Be careful with the water. We spoke about that last week as well with Beijing and Shanghai. Because in Amsterdam every drop counts. Because we have to deal with the water, otherwise we wouldn't have been there. We live in a swamp, in fact. So we have to be specialists in water management, otherwise we have not dry feet. Another one is a very important one. When you talk about public and private companionship, you need to challenge each other. So what is very important is that you do your competitions and your tenders very well. So when you're in the city council, you can have your conditions and requirements for investments. For example, in Amsterdam, we say, okay, this part of the city, this plot is maybe about 50 million euros. And the consortium or the developer or investor with the best sustainable plan will win. So you agree on 50 million euros for a plot, but you tender on skills, sustainable skills, and results. And I think that's a way to improve the quality of life in the long term. We created a new institute for advanced metropolitan solutions. Again, the combination of technique, innovation, environmental engineering skills with the latest scientific insights. For example, now we have a project that's called rowboats. There will be robotic boats in the canals that will collect the waste and bring it to the waste to energy plant. Must be great. No traffic jams for all that kind of stuff. Okay, and then we talk about permits, taxations, electric cars, for example, tax advantages. I said to my colleagues this morning from Arcadis, well, you have a lot of big cars here. And then they said and explained to me, well, the taxation system in Amsterdam is different because we tax big cars. And so we have tall people in small cars. That's a way of guiding your city into a new era. Greening the canal boat float, for example, was what we did. New waste to energy plants. And I talked about carbon pricing and valuing water. I think when you talk with multinational companies, at least the Dutch ones like Unilever, Shell, Philips, AkzoNobel, DSM, they know that carbon pricing will be there in 4 or 5 years. That it's about valuing water. So when you have your plans, you have to value water, because maybe in 10 years your business models will be changed. So what can you do? You can do policy solutions and technical solutions. The policy is about integrated urban planning and resiliency, as I explained about the waterfront development in Amsterdam and maybe in Milan. It's about climate resilient tendering. It's about a link between taxation and investments, and it's preparation on resource efficiency. And on the other hand, you have, of course, the technical solutions, and that's the reason why I work for Arcadis, an engineering company, 27,000 people all over the world, inspiring each other. For example, here you see Paris, a project with a white building with the trees on top of it. It's called 1000 arbres. It's also the result of a competition in Paris. It's affordable housing combined with a green park on the roof. That's a new way of dealing with things. I will speed up the process for my colleagues who will speak after me. So what kind of cooperation is needed? I think you have to be aware of the considerations of your partners. How can you involve decision makers in implementing smart solutions? Well, you have to give them a reason why to act, because, for example, of reduction of CO2 output, or less traffic delays, or more goodwill for urban users, or less nuisance by construction projects, very important for residents. So there's again that balance between ambitions, challenges, considerations, and reasons to act. A few examples. This is Amsterdam. There in that orange building you see the global headquarters of our company Arcadis, and here we have the ring road to the airport, and we will make a tunnel out of it so that we can put a park on top of the tunnel. So all the cars you see there on the right side will be not visible anymore. There will be a new clean tech infrastructure thing. And we are busy with a project that's called Mobility as a Service. So it's not cool to have a car, it's cool to have chain mobility. So you go with your bicycle or a cab to the airport, a train, the bike, you combine everything. Mobility is a service. Enjoyment for all generations, clean tech, you can do combinations of this. Here you see cable cars as well. Smart and green buildings, of course. Here you see parks on rooftops, and on the right hand, that's the city of Utrecht. We won a competition there, 80,000 square meters, with your architect from Italy, Stefano Bogheri. So we are very proud that he will be present in the Netherlands as well in 3-4 years. This is an artist impression. Energy neutral residential areas, of course, with solar panels, everything. Resilient urban design. You see here some water squares in Rotterdam and Dordrecht in the Netherlands, but also living with nature is living with the water, is building with nature. You see here the project in the Netherlands, Room for the River, after the floods 20 years ago. So when there's no rain, the canal on the right-hand side will be empty, and it's a park. You can play football there on a Sunday afternoon, but when it rains, it's filled. It captures the water so that there will be no floods in the city itself. And on your left hand here, you see New York City. We were involved at the design and urban planning of what they call the Big U. So they have protection for the floods after Sandy, and at the same time, it's a park. So on a Sunday afternoon, you see again children playing football there, and it protects all the buildings behind. Printed buildings, we're doing 3D printing canal houses in Amsterdam. It's crazy, it sounds crazy. First time I thought that we are really crazy, but it's happening now. It's more sustainable because when you're bored with your canal house, you wrap it up and are making and printing a new one after 20 years or something like that. Because it's all about improving quality of life. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie, grazie a Caroline Gerels.
Thank you, Caroline. Thanks for telling us what cities do and what enterprises do for cities. I would like to go on with China, and let's see what what Kevin Khan does. He's the president of the ZDU, and best urban electric mobility solution provider in a city where you've got yellow cars. These are the cars manufactured by ZDU.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today and address to this meeting about the green economy. I'd like to thank the organizers for offering us this platform where we can discuss the transition towards the green economy. Cars fueled with new energies are an important part of the green economy. And I'd like to share with everybody the transport solutions offered by Trudeau about the green economy and about micromobility. I'll subdivide my presentation into 3 parts. I will first address the current development of new energy sources in China. Then I'll address the micro-mobility plan by my company, Trudeau, and then I'll talk about alliances, the partnership systems worked out by Trudeau. The development of new energy, or let's say new fuel types, new forms of energy for cars in China. In 1991, the government started to incentivize companies producing key components. Then the Chinese government promoted the production of new types of cars with the alternative sources of energies, and then case studies followed. At this moment in time, which is the 4th period, the government is strongly promoting electrification in car production. In China, this is becoming a key pillar. In 2014, the President Xi Jinping issued a directive to support this development. And following on that, other guidelines were set and other policies were set always following the vision set by the President. The current forecast is that in 2017, the percentage of these cars will reach 700,000 cars, and that will be a big growth compared to 2016. Let's go into the details of the performance of this sector in 2016. Electric cars, 100% electric cars amounted to 248,000, with a 75% growth. As far as the most growing models, we have the A00 or A00. So great appreciation was shown for these car models. And the Cerengo project is another important example in Italy. Let me now give you some background about Jadot. Jadot was the first to submit a micromobility plan based on 100% electric cars. We have 5 research centers worldwide, and we organize an entire complete supply chain from production to sale. And we ranked 4th in getting the certification, the government certification for cars in the new energy sector. Jadot for urban electric mobility. Of course, traffic is an issue. Parking is another issue. And so we promote the use of small cars, compact cars. We want to have to occupy less space, and we want to reduce consumption and emissions. Jadot is the first Chinese company that started along the development of new types of cars. And in 10 years, we developed various models that are all pioneering in the sector in terms of design and development. At the moment, Jadot is implementing its third 5-year plan, and at this stage, we are very much focused on enhancing the quality of products, so higher quality for our consumers. Jadot is highly appreciated in China. Till October this year, we sold 10,000 cars, which accounts for 11% of the domestic new energy automobile market, and 15% of electric cars, 100% electric cars. At the moment, Jadot is selling cars all over the world in 4 continents and 18 different countries. And there we have promoted this car in the framework of our micromobility plan. Italy is a country we're working with the best results. Our car has been identified for the G20 in China this year. Our company is based on this platform platform of macro data for internet technologies. And through this platform, we can be more efficient in managing our cars. We are collaborating with Italian organizations for environmental protection and have promoted the EcoWatch project. This is about installing many sensors on board to collect plenty of environmental information while driving. We can collect information about noise, about air pollution, and then send all these data are sent to and transmitted to the platform of the environmental ministry. So this way we can improve environmental monitoring. So this is a collaboration, a very successful collaboration, and this is certainly, and for this we should very much thank the Italian colleagues. I'd like to thank the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry for the Environment, sorry, and really applaud them for their successful work. I firmly believe that the Italian government, well, in Italy, there'll be more and more companies developing and growing in this sector. The micro-mobility plan by Dodo is, let's say, a sort of supplementary mode because, you know, you may use train or take an airplane for a long trip. So this is, let's say, another, it's, let's say, a sort of, let's say, intermediate solution between bikes and trains and airplanes. Urban mobility is certainly a weakness, and indeed our mission is to promote the mobility reform, and we want to become the benchmark for the new green mobility. Well, in closing, I'd like to submit our micromobility system. So we use cars and connect trade, research, human life. So we connect all these systems together to offer smart mobility solutions. The solution provider, so our sector, is of course moving from internet technologies to the Internet of Things. And through our cars, we want to combine, to integrate all the other elements to boost the green economy. Well, there's a huge market in this industry, and therefore we'll be very happy to collaborate with businesses, with Italian businesses and Italian organizations and institutions in the industry. And both work for the green economy. All of us work for the green economy. And if you want to join, please contact us through this, through mail or telephone number or through the Italian colleagues. Let me wish you full success in this event, and I also wish companies in the audience to successfully implement their transition towards the green economy. And I wish faster developments for Italian green economy businesses.
Mr. Khan, can you please? Non mi era mai successo finora nella mia carriera, ma insomma ho una domanda che arriva da Twitter in tempo reale.
So I think that people liked your presentation because people are asking via Twitter whether your cars will be sold in Italy and how much they cost.
Okay, so the question, in Italy, we have group, and our group is not currently we are not selling the car. We are doing the car sharing program. So use this kind of transportation solution. We can use a small space and easily you can book the car from the app, and also you can pay, and this kind of solution is I think will future we say new energy industry will have 4 phases. First, it's electrical. Secondly, it's connected. Thirdly, it's intelligent. And the last one is sharing. So that's, my solution. But I think we will sell the car if the customer like.
Allora, la risposta l'avete sentita. Se volete guidare una Jiddu.
Okay, you have heard the answer, so you can rent it. Because they're against private property. It's just a joke, don't worry. That's why you're saying so, because you're against private property. So thanks, Mr. Tang. That was very interesting. I would really like to thank Dr. Clark now, who will complete the picture that we had just drafted of the 3 planet scenarios. Donald Trump's United States and the others. To you, the floor.
Let me start off by thanking the organizers and the different groups for inviting me to this conference. You will soon see that I will be walking around the audience to be sure no one's texting or doing something but paying attention to my talk. That was a joke. Everybody get that? Okay. Sorry, I just start off. It's been a long morning and I think everybody's enjoyed it. So what I want to do, though, is first of all acknowledge the fact that my wife is here. She speaks fluent Italian, so if you have questions about anything I say and you're from Italy, please ask her. Her name is Andrea, and she's at the far left. Notice, folks, I always point to the left. My son, Paxton, is here. He's sitting next to Andrea, and in 1 month from today, he will be 10 years old. So Paxton is here. And just so that you know, I'm going to be concluding my talk in large part because of both of them. The future is not 25 or 50 years from now. It is today, tomorrow, and as my son and your children and grandchildren grow up. So that's my conclusion, and at that, I will give you information as to how to contact me. Now let me try the mobile version of this. Hang on. Is this working? Can you hear me? Yes or no? Yeah. That was a joke. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can get this to work correctly. There we go. All right. So, first of all, you can see on the screen that there are a number of things that I have done, and I hope all of you like that picture of me. That was from a Chinese journal about 3 years ago, because I published a book in Mandarin called The Green Industrial Revolution. And that book has had quite an influence on China and the rest of the world, and I want to be sure that you all understand it is also in English. It is not in Italian, French, or Spanish yet, but that may be coming. But you'll also see that I've done things that you've heard from other people talking, including smart green cities and including some other areas of interest, which I'll get into in mobility and that sort of, okay? What I will not talk about is a gentleman who is now in China today. I've forgotten his first name and last name. He's President of the United States, and he's in China today, and it's going to be interesting to follow what happens as a result of that. I won't make any comments about it, but if anybody has any questions, you can certainly ask me. No, not now. But I want to say this very clearly. I am not speaking as a representative of the United States. I am speaking as someone who had been in government in California as the advisor to the governor of California on renewable energy. I've also been an academic and have a number of years as being a professor at the University of California system in California. And to be clear about it, in my third area, which you're all, I'm sure, aware of, I've started businesses, and I'm going to talk about that as well. In other words, I know something about business, companies, and other areas. So I wanted to start that off, but also, let's see, the clicker's working here. There we go. Also, these are some other books that I've done, and I want to note you the thing in the middle there, that picture, is because I'm also a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize with scientists from around the world in 2007 because of what we had all done in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I am currently also involved with the UN in what is now called the G19. The G19 is because, what's his name? Trump dropped America out of the important strategy and the combining of nations around the world to stop climate change and do something positive for our environment. That happened last summer in July, and as a result of that, I'm also mentioning this because from California, we in the state of California have what we now are calling a nation state. And we in California, 39 million people, are going to be working with the United Nations and other groups throughout the world. You heard earlier about the idea of sustainable communities and cities, and that is one of the things that we are beginning to do and have been trying to do, and independently and different from the rest of the United States. There are other states in the U.S. doing this, not just us. But the important thing is we're going to be doing and matching and exceeding, we think, the requirements and standards and other things that the G19 will be doing. So just stay tuned for all of that because it's rather important. Then I want to point out two things first. On the upper left-hand corner is a book that I did called The Next Economics. And I say that because it's very important. How many of you in this room feel that economics is a science? If you do, please raise your hand. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Out of the 200 people, 9 people. Oh, 10. Oh, 11, sorry. I need to talk to you about this later. Okay, the point is the fact is that economics is not a science. Let me repeat that. It is not a science. Science is both quantitative statistics and qualitative. That is, what does a word mean? When someone gives you numbers validated by a CPA firm that says 1 + 1 = 7, and is validated by a well-known, powerful CPA firm, when I was in state government, we were getting those numbers, and I started asking questions. What is this? And we found out it was fraud by a company called Enron. Has anybody ever heard of Enron? You probably all have. They were around the world robbing people. And the point of it is, we have to ask questions about numbers and definitions and everything. I want to be sure I make it very clear. I'm asking questions too, because what do we mean by green? In the United States, they talk about clean energy. And how do you define clean energy? Coal. Clean coal. In English, that's called an oxymoron. Two words that are different put together. We also talk about clean energy and things like, and I'm sorry if some people don't like this, called nuclear power. No, because where does the waste go? You ask anybody in France, no one will give you the answer. They don't know. I say this because, ladies and gentlemen, I spent a decade working for an organization called the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. We had 8,300 people. It's the second largest research lab in the world in Northern California, and I learned what science was about. It's almost like I got a second PhD. And it's qualitative and quantitative. So when I talk about the next economics, it's based on a book that I did called Qualitative Economics. That book is going to be updated and out next year. So my point to what I'm going to be talking about in some detail, and I have to go through this quickly, but I know that you will all have access to these slides so you can see all the details later, is that economics has to be both qualitative and quantitative, and what's important about it is it's going to have to look at it in a circular fashion. That is to say, one thing is going to impact another, that will impact another, and will impact, and if we can see how these things can be connected, then we're going to be changing the world. And that's what the new or the next economics is. This is important for lots of reasons, because everything you've heard so far today talks a little bit about supply and demand. The market. It's great to talk about these things, but the reality of it is economics, based on Adam Smith, neoclassical economics, has never been that way. The government has never been an invisible hand. It's nice in theory, but in reality it's not the case. And so what we have to look at, and some of the things we just talked about regarding electrical cars and other vehicles, is we have to see government and institutions very involved with what we want for the future, today, not 20 years from now or 30 years from now. It's okay to talk about that, but there are a few of us in this audience who won't be there then, including me. I hope so, but maybe not. So what we have to do is take these changes and move them immediately, okay? So now let me go through some details. Go clicker, there we go, all right. One of the companies that I formed in San Francisco years ago did media, documentary films, and education. I'm still doing some more of that because one of the things I've learned from my son, who's almost 10 years old, is that kids today learn from social media. And they learn it quicker than all of us, and we follow and watch them, and we learn things. And it's really important that that happens, that we actually look at using animation and other things as a way to communicate. And the reason I bring that up is because there's a lot of topics out there that are very important. I won't go through all the details. Right now, the thing to do is look at the fact that the world is round, not flat. Economics typically talks about, remember, supply, demand, flat. No, the world is round. These things are all connected, and not just at one point in time, but if we have a problem, and I'll show you some examples of this. Oh, sorry about that. This is just, I had to just show this, and I'll get off the subject recently. I was surprised to get here in Italy and find, what's this guy's name too? The one on the bottom right. Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein. That was a joke. Sexual harassment is a topic that's been around for a long time. I did a documentary on it in 1980 because it was a major issue back then. We're probably going to re-release it. But the fact is, we have these kinds of issues today that we all have to move ahead on and do something about. And I just want to bring that up for one point related to what I will be talking about in a second. Some of the solutions. I mentioned this documentary I made years ago on sexual harassment. Ed Asner, the actor, hosted that. He's the one who starred in the film. His voice was in Up. And he's also been very involved in helping and working on this topic for 4 decades now.
The top person there is Norman Cousins. He wrote books, things about how laughter is good medicine. In the United States, we have a thing called affordable care, based on a so-called Obamacare. And my title for that is Trump Doesn't Care. That was not a joke, but I don't see anyone laughing. But anyway, okay. So moving ahead, solutions. How do we make economics into a science, qualitative and quantitative? We had quotes earlier today from the Economist Journal. This is the Economist that came out in July 2009, almost a year after the crisis that happened globally on the economics in October 2010. One of the things I'm doing to make economics into a science is I filed 2 patents, and there's one of them there. The other thing is working with companies like LED bulbs. I hope all of you have those in your house. People have asked already at this conference how many people ride a bike. How many of you use LED bulbs in your homes, in your offices? 2, 3? Oh my God. Okay, I have a company that's going to come to Italy soon and talk to all of you. LED bulbs are a disruptive economics because they cost a little bit more, but those bulbs last for 8 or 10 years, and you don't have to go change them every year or two. Nor when you have the LED bulbs on top of a building like this or this roof, think about the labor cost just to change the bulbs. That's the point. You have to have some energy efficiency and conservation. This goes into showing how all of these things are important because it impacts our health. Some of you are well aware of this, and I know if I ask this question, I may get some people going boo or whatever, but how many of you in here smoke cigarettes? 2, 3? I'll turn my back. Okay, how many? What, 100? No, no, okay. That's one of the problems, folks. We have to watch that too. That is one thing that's happening in the United States and other countries, but really we have to control that, partly because of our children and our parents as well as ourselves, and that's an economic cost in terms of people's health. Again, circular economics. This just shows you part of what qualitative economics tries to do, because as you define these things, you can begin to see why they're important. We were just hearing about electric cars. The issue with electric cars is important because what happens? You have to recharge it. Plug it in somewhere. Where? And where does that power come from? If that power is coming from a fossil fuel source, that's a problem. And it could be a problem because it means with increased demand for electric cars, we are then looking at the possibility of increased demand from power coming from fossil fuel sources. So we have to watch that carefully. I'm going to show you a solution to the problem that I think you'll all enjoy. This is a chart, actually we saw something similar before, just simply showing how electric cars are really beginning to grow around the world and become more and more popular. And I think that you'll see that. One of the points that was made earlier is electric cars here in Italy. Well, the question is, how does Tesla increase its amount of electric cars? Those electric cars that Tesla has in US dollars cost well over 150,000 US dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think any of you can take out of your pocket, sir, do you have 150,000? No, I don't think anybody could do that. But what they do in America to get those cars going, they lease the cars. People don't buy them, they basically rent them for a period of time. And then they're going to be modernized and changed. So the point I'm trying to make to all of you is there are other ways of finding solutions to the problems that we were talking about earlier. This goes to another issue. Anybody ever hear of a man who was Vice President of the United States by Al Gore? Only 3 or 4? Well, oh, more. Good, I'm glad. Okay. He has a movie out now called The Sequel, because he did a documentary called An Inconvenient Truth that was very popular and had a big impact throughout the world. My only point, though, is I have said in the media, have seen that new film, The Sequel, come out, and all it does, it talks more about how he sees climate change and climate changing. The point that you've heard today, and what I wanted to emphasize in particular too, is what are the solutions to climate change? Al Gore is a fantastic person, but I thought it was kind of unusual he didn't get into the solutions. So I know the guy, and I said to him, Al, listen, I'm going to do a sequel to your sequel. It's going to be called The Convenient Truth, Cases of Cities and Communities that are Sustainable. That's what we need more of and what we have to do. And in fact, that's the topic of a book that I'll be doing next year. So, how do we do that? These are some communities and pictures of different places, not just the academic side of it in terms of the graph. By the way, that came from The Economist based on my book that I've done called Agile Energy Systems, but also in terms of having those solar panels on top of your roofs, in your car garages or whatever. And that's what's important. How do we get those things integrated to our systems and how can they be useful? And I'm going to show you some cases. This is an example of how we have to also see the systems integrated, whether it has to do with water, waste, or other things. It's a very, very important thing, as you just heard from Amsterdam and from the Netherlands. That's one thing that they've been able to do very successfully over the last couple of decades. There are other examples of that too, by the way, from them. This gets us into, all right, what is the cost for all of this if we don't do something? And this is just an example of what we have to figure. It's not just the cost of drilling for oil and gas, it's shipping, it's processing, it's also the climate problems. They all have to be calculated and put into place. Again, look at the economic roundup. Getting the information. This is a report from the German government or programs, some of the things that they're doing. And Germany has been one of the leaders in this. I've also been a visiting professor in Denmark. And Denmark and the Nordic countries have also been leading, as well as Italy and other parts of Europe. Whereas the United States, we've fallen way behind as a country. And that's it's getting worse, actually. So we have to find solutions. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is out of New York City, started doing research and work on the circular economy. What does it mean? How does it fit? And I won't go through all of these details. You can see it all and read about it later because I'll give you some more examples. But what it is looking at how different kinds of conditions all work together and it can be integrated to solve problems in our communities, in our homes, in our families as well, and workplaces too. This just gets into some of the things of how you can adapt and use mitigation strategies as to solve the problems so you're actually getting something positive that's coming from what can be considered a negative problem. This goes to how the systems can be looked at in terms of their integration. This is a graphic, and I'm going to show you some actual examples of it, but you've got wind farms, you've got solar farms, but you also have solar on top of buildings, and you have other biofuels as well that are available. This just shows a colleague of mine, I was on her PhD committee, and she did this study of how they're doing this in China. And I bring this up because China has become very much of a leader in this whole area, as you heard just earlier, all right? And because of the numbers of people and the impact that it has throughout China, this is becoming an extremely important and powerful strategy for the entire Chinese government. This gets into the LED bulbs I showed you before and why they're so important, and I urge you all, and I'm not selling bulbs outside, believe me, I'm not, but I know a couple of places that would. But you really should check this out if you haven't already. This gets into an example of a university campus in California that I was an advisor for. We put solar panels over the parking structure, as you can see. The students loved it. Why? Not because of the solar. They came out after being in the classroom all day at 3 in the afternoon, and instead of it being hot, their cars were shaded. So we had to actually put up systems that showed them how much energy was also being generated. But that's, again, being the circular thought of putting things together, not just isolated in one way. This is also true of the other is the campus. Those red areas are all solar-powered roofs for campus buildings. This shows another example. Some of you ever heard of the company called Google? No one has? No, never. That was a joke. Okay. All right. Google. They've done this too, but they've also took it in terms of here's their electric cars their employees have. The founders of Google are here. And all those buildings are also solar powered and covered. Google also has, this was featured in one of my books, also has a fuel cell system too as a backup for when the sun is not out, like at night or whatever, instead of batteries. Going back over 100 years, we saw an example earlier, electric car in 1901. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is an interesting thing that you all either should be aware of if you're not already. You've heard of Tesla, the Tesla car, and you've heard of, I'm sure, before, Thomas Edison. I won't get into all the science and details of it, but the important fact here is that what happened to the car happened 100 years ago. And it happened also with the use of AC and DC energy systems. Again, there's a lot to say about it. But if we had done what Tesla had suggested at the turn of the 20th century, which is similar to my pushing this thing or you all having cell phones, in other words, AC systems, we would have a different world than we have today. But instead we have one that's built on something very different. Tesla, put lighting in for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 using AC systems. In other words, where you didn't have wires connecting those lighting, but you had electronic systems using the air system. You get further into that, you have your first hybrid car in 1903. So we talked about an all-electric car in 1901 in America. This came from Germany. What happened? I'm sorry. I didn't show the slide of this. I have a couple of slides in between this one and the next one. What happened was, in 1923, Henry Ford, who had a car using fuel from his farmlands for fueling the car, but the oil and gas industry stopped all of that in the United States, and it happened also in other parts of the world, including here in Europe, and the net result of it was we are all getting dependent on gasoline-powered cars. There's been a transition to that to what is called natural gas. We heard a little bit about electric cars, but there's also cars called hydrogen fuel cell cars. So this just shows an example of that. If they're coming for hydrogen fuel cell from solar, you can see how that can be a circular economy concept, and it's being done. This just shows how Toyota is looking at how this circular economics actually works and can be used. This is an example of our friend Mr. Elon Musk in front of his Tesla car and some of the economics behind it. And then a company in China called Honergy. To my colleagues from China, I'm sure you're familiar with this company. It's located in Beijing. They have invented an all-solar powered car. That car is only powered by the solar roofs on top of it. Imagine that, okay? Now you think of that and look at it in some kind of a sense of like, does this make any sense? It makes a lot of sense, and this is something that, again, is being looked at globally. Again, look at the statistics and the numbers, all of that. By the way, I just want to show real quickly, it's over here, but there's the solar-powered cars and the economics of it all are extremely dramatic. And some of you may have seen solar panels on tops of roofs, but this is the thin film solar that is used in that kind of a car. And again, this is a technology in part invented in the United States. A company that did it was actually bought out by an oil and gas funded company, and it was buried. Now it's come back from China. Different technology, but still using the same idea. My point to all of you is that's what we have to watch out for. When we talk about circular economics, we're also talking about the other side of the coin, which is fossil fuels. I want to bring out the fact that Mr. Xi, the president of China, talks about green development. It's very much in the same kind of thing that I've just been discussing in some detail, but something all of us need to be very aware of. And then my clock is ticking, so I'll go through this quickly. These are some points in his plan that he's talked about. There's now, as was mentioned, the 13th five-year plan that's come out from China. This shows some of the impact that the idea of the nation state of California and others are going to have from the G19. This shows the impact that, of course, all of this has on a green industrial revolution it's already had here in Europe. This is in Denmark as an example because the Danes were the ones who really started a lot of the wind turbines and other things, not only on the land but offshore, which is something now happening all over the world. Again, showing the interconnection between climate change and health and the cost, why we have to take some action in this area. My conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, that's my son and my grown son down on the right. My grown son teaching my young son a few years ago how a typewriter works. Anybody, you all remember typewriters. And then finally, this shows the hydrogen fuel cell cars, but also the all solar powered car. And then my son showing my grandson a toy that they're playing with in our house a few years ago. So I just want to end it with that. This is information all you can catch or contact me by. Thank you very much.
Grazie al professor Clark. Prima avevo visto una cartina della Danimarca.
I had seen a map of Denmark showing that because we know that Denmark is now focusing on wind energy, and we know we have now Rainer Karan, Vice President of Vestas, who is specializing in wind energy. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure for me to be here at Rimini. Congratulations for this event and for this big and important fair in Italy. I'm going to talk about the future of renewable energies on a world scale. And since my company is operating in wind farms, electricity produced with wind farms, of course I'm going to address that topic. Renewables are unstoppable. That's my first message. Well, every day newspapers write that there are more and more products, more and more renewable energies, and should have, I think just a decade ago people would have laughed if we had shown them developments of this kind. And that applies also to countries where you wouldn't even think of. Latin America, African countries, or elsewhere. A few figures. We have reached almost 500 gigawatts of wind energy across the world. That's the cumulative capacity in just a few years. Why is all this happening? Well, clearly we all want to cherish a green world and a green economy, producing electricity without CO2 emissions. However, despite all thanks to all the technological progress, green energy has become competitive. Where do it come from? 15 years ago, these systems were incentivized in Europe and in a few others, driven by the so-called feed-in tariffs. And now it's become, the coverage is truly global. And there are auctions and tender procurement systems in place. The implication is that the cost of energy produced through renewable energies, of course depending on the country, it's become very competitive, more competitive than fossil fuels. Where are we going? Well, we estimate that the cost of energy produced through renewable sources will further diminish because there is still room for technological improvements, because we know more about how to better exploit the solar energy and wind energy. Economies of scale, it used to be a niche, and now it's an industry with all the expertise benefiting both the production of turbines, but also the operating conditions all along the 20 or 30 life cycle, 30-year life cycle. Wind or solar, both of them. The message is very simple. Because there's enough market for both of them. And there are also synergies to be made, both in terms of day and night, and in terms of seasonal cycles. Well, these are some outcomes of the auctions all around the world, of course, depending on the country. I mean, sometimes, of course, so wind farms are more competitive than solar systems. Well, it depends. Where are we going? Where are the frontiers of innovation? Of course, we advocate innovation and we push innovation. We look for more effective and more competitive systems. And here is an example of a research study that we're performing to change some fundamentals. There's still development projects, but I mean at the, let's say, drawing board stage, but they could bring in substantial breakthroughs for the future. Nowadays, wind farms can be installed in sites that would have been impossible up to just a few years ago. It's become feasible. And then, of course, storage. This integration is already happening now. So feeding tariffs, so we said, corporate PPAs are a trend. It's not really happening in Europe, but it's bound to happen in Europe too. The actors. Well, we used to have independent power producers and utilities in the past, but we'll increasingly see new actors investing in renewable energies. Here are just a few examples. It's an ongoing trend. This is another trend. So far, the business model of these companies used to be based on oil, but part of their investments are shifted towards renewable energies. I leave it to you to consider that. And we shouldn't underestimate the role played by the social responsibility, by corporate social responsibility. It's becoming a business requirement, as we heard on many occasions. What will be the future like? The future will see more renewable energies, for sure. We'll see more wind energy production, new systems, new actors. We, of course, want to push innovation because that is the way to further lower the cost of energy and make it even more competitive. So I invite all of you to follow the same path and make the energy even greener. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. Very interesting, and the figures are self-explanatory. Yeah, next to me I have Katia Bastioli, the managing director of Novamont in Italy. Well, a leader in bioplastic materials and other things. Thank you very much for this invitation. Yes, I'm going to talk about bioeconomy because from our viewpoint, it's a key aspect of the circular economy. It's about renewable raw materials, and therefore we shouldn't just think in technical terms, we should instead think in terms of the development model and of our mindset. So the bioeconomy in terms of renewable energies, well, as was the case in the past, but also in the present, well, may create huge problems. So it's key to think in terms of a broad strategy, and that, of course, implies a greater efficiency of systems. So bioeconomy means local regeneration. It must be rooted in the local dimension. We must avoid moving large biomasses from one place to the other and create even further damage, because if you drill a hole to extract oil, of course, you run into a number of challenges there. But then if the industry, let's say, tries to monopolize the agricultural world, well, that's another big issue. We must really promote synergy and interaction between all the various stakeholders. The bioeconomy shouldn't allow for large local sites. It is very important to have a widespread system. The notion of prosumers, of a world, a fragmented world where it is reading, let's say, interpreting prosumers is becoming more and more important, is part of the bioeconomy vision. Let me use the example of Italy. Of course, that will well, in the framework, in the European framework, to share with you what we've done. But let me start from some general considerations. Undoubtedly, the issue of climate is huge every year, and this is the most recent gas balloting, the greenhouse gas balloting, with 400.3 ppm of CO2. But we can't forget that along with climate change, we must consider the phenomenon of desertification. Well, it's a huge challenge, and we certainly can't neglect it. We can't neglect soil degradation and the need for better regulations there too, because the frontier of desertification is moving upwards, and it's doing so, and it's accelerating, and Italy is on, let's say, on the frontier of it, and we can see it very clearly. On the initiative of by COP21, adding organic matter to the soil, at least 4 per 1,000 per year, could counter the emissions by fossil fuels. Soil quality is therefore a key issue, along with, of course, hunger. If we do not improve climate and soil degradation, migration waves will be even bigger on a world scale. So these are all interconnected phenomena and require a systems model. Of course, we want to grow renewable sources, but we must also consider the raw materials required and the availability of raw materials on the planet, and think in systemic terms so as to fall into another trap. Bio-waste is an economic growth driver. This is the production in Europe, and it's 40% of, 66% of organic waste in Europe is not recycled. On the one hand, we have the issue of soil desertification. On the other hand, still in Europe, we have a huge organic or bio-waste, which could be turned into work systems, reduction of CO2. If we can correctly treat this waste and use it in the soil, we can certainly contribute to a reduction in CO2 emissions and greenhouse effect, and we make our soil more fertile. Despite all the technologies available, this is the situation. So we hope that with the circular economy package, we can solve the problem at a European level. Actually, we talk about acceleration, but we continue not to do what is required. And the same applies to plastics. Plastic materials are light, they increase the life of food, for example, but when we hint at recycling as a solution, and we have done it for so many years, well, in packaging, it's only 2% the actual recycling percentage. It's 14% when we refer to downcycling, recycling. Then we have about 15% for energy recovery, incineration, 40 for the dump, and a huge amount of plastic traveling around the world. Well, obviously, eco-design is key. We must understand how to design these products, since mechanical recycling is not enough. What did Novamont do? Well, we are pioneers in this industry. We thought of how to produce bioplastic materials, calling into question the production of raw materials, and based on local actions. So regeneration of deindustrialized sites, first, bringing in technologies not for fuels or energies, but for better added value products with, let's say, energy, with positive energy repercussions. An open sky laboratory in terms of agriculture and feedstocks, and rethinking the products in terms of systems redesign. That's why we chose bio-waste as a starting point. We thought, well, we can do something. We can make bioplastic materials with degrading in the soil, and only in applications where plastic could pollute bio-waste, we can improve from dump to high quality compost and renewable energies like methane. We started many years ago. Then the Italian Compost Association and the municipalities joined in, and over and above our company, the vision was to bring high quality compost for a number of applications. For example, bio-waste bags or labels for fruit and vegetables, food service, coffee pods, whatever could not be recycled, but it can be recycled biologically to produce a high quality compost. So for that purpose, we developed a number of integrated technologies, from bioplastics and the so-called polyester sources. We created a number of technologies to make building blocks with sugars or biobutanediol, very recent. We're launching the first system of bio-THF worldwide. And we are also working with arid crops. And we got the first hybrids of thistle in collaboration with research institutes like ENEA, Italian Research Institute. Quite a revolutionary work, in my opinion, to use marginal arid grounds for productions, not just for, let's say, food production, but also different foods and also pet food. We have 4 plants worldwide. Each site is connected to the other, and every region is connected to the other. And what is even more important, we set up a platform with the participation of many startups and larger corporations, all working at a series of fractions and outputs. And let me talk about the herbicides. The only herbicide which is contained in geranium is considered with great interest since glyphosate and other pesticides. I mean, Europe wants to eliminate them so as to improve the quality of soil and the quality of food. And President Macron recently declared that by 2020 wants to leave glyphosate and is interested in this type of products. At the moment, they're based on arid crops, but you can use different crops. Well, arid places are interesting because, well, for example, for the Mediterranean, not just for the north, but also for the south of the Mediterranean. Local regeneration, cultural regeneration, there are a number of positive byproducts, let's say. In Italy, we have a law dating back to 2006 to set high standards for compost quality. And so that, along with the development of bioplastics, created quite an interesting case. And now, with the help of the Italian Consortium for Composters and the Italian municipalities, we've come to a very interesting case. From 10 million, 6 million are collected, I mean, through separate collection. 1.7 billion euros turnover, 9,000 jobs. Milan is the world capital, and I'm proud to say that, for the quantity and quality of the bio-waste collected. We have a plant in Montello, for example, that can produce biogas and in this moment in time methane too. So the collaboration between the Italian consortium of composters and Asso Bioplastic led to a national study about the destiny of biodegradable plastic, and in a territory like Italy, where separate collection affects 60% and not 100% of the country, 68% of the biodegradable plastic are recycled in the compost, and only 0.85% of bioplastics end up in the recycling stream. There's certainly a room for improvement, and compost includes 3.1% plastics because there are a number of products that end up in the compost, and they shouldn't do so because, of course, when you add it to the soil, you must be sure that plastics are absent, because otherwise they end up in the water and soil. Italy is a very important case study about what can be done, and that's not enough. I mean, there's a collaboration platform, because what is being done with in the composting world and the recycling world is certainly not easy, but of course we need a correct use of the various streams. And finally, an important document signed and already moving beyond it between multi-utilities and the academic world and the environmental one. Now all the raw materials can be turned into compost, biomethane, etc. And that's a collaboration platform by companies, universities, all working together to do something different. Removing these 4 million means saving 5 million tons, and if we apply the same model to Europe, and I'm just talking about 39 million bio waste from food, well, we could save 46 million tons of CO2, and that's not enough. We can create a supply chain including farming, research, production, processing of plastics, and composting. Bioeconomy based on interconnected system can help us reconnect the economy with society. And as I said many times, but that goes beyond the industry or agriculture. Because, well, that runs against also of the crisis of democracy. Companies are part of the social fabric, and we must combine agriculture, industry, environmental actors, the world of education, trade unionists. We should all be involved in a common interconnected project, since water, air, electricity, and materials are all connected in a systems model, and therefore regional projects of interconnected supply chains are the way to change and are the way to accelerate, because there's no time left. We need to step up our efforts, and shared projects are the only way to do that and step up the change. Well, unfortunately, I can't see the required acceleration in Italy. What I can see, however, are platforms that could boost change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Perché intanto grazie, molto interessante questo discorso che lo sviluppo.
What you said, green development, is very, very interesting, and it is a true interesting thing. From Twitter, have you ever thought about building materials? Let's say that we've got so many sectors, biomass, for example. Thistle stem might be used as a fibrous material for insulation panels, or many other chemicals that are biochemicals that are part of the chain might be used in such a way. So there is indeed a very wide range of opportunities. Let me thank for your patience, Mr. Carlo Pignoloni, who is in charge of Enel Green Power Italy, a manager for renewable energies, who is one of the managers of the most important sectors at our world level. So, Carlo Pignoloni, to you the floor. Let me also thank all of you for the invitation to this session where complex issues are at stake. Green power and Enel Green Power in particular have grown substantially. We believed in the development of renewable energy since the very beginning, and Europe has been the starting point for the development of renewables, and we can now also do it in other countries as well. Well, now I would like to say, how can we, since we've started from Europe, how can we go back to Europe? Because we are now lagging behind as far as the use of renewable energies are concerned. Why is it so? Because we started in a certain way, and today we have to change. As for renewable energies, we set objectives. A few countries abided by, others didn't, and now new goals have been established, and now we need to change the rules of the game. And there are various examples around the world. The success of renewable energies has been possible thanks to a few systems that have been thought for this kind of technologies that are a bit different from traditional fossil fuel technology. So my efforts will be starting from policy making and coming up with the elements that are required to give the opportunity to go back to the development of renewable energies as was done in the past. Many countries have invested in this. Countries like South Africa or Brazil that started very later, but our market has not changed because of the renewable energies, and this is the moot point in Europe. Talks about renewables directive when it was true when renewable energies were just a niche, whereas now they are the most important energy power. They are the main source of energy. So what is the contradiction? The contradiction is having very challenging objective, but without having any equally challenging means. So we have to work on that. Electrical industries. They want to increase by 75%, which is a clear sign by electrical companies to participate in this development. There's another issue. Tendering and technology neutral are the various pillars, masts that have been introduced by Europe and have been applied to Spain. And now we try and exploit all the various sources of renewable energies. The basic issue is that there is a fragmentation, and it might be a problem because if it is true that results have been set at a national level, be they right or wrong, we have to think of a whole system to be implemented, and so the borders of nations do not help. Jealousies between nations do not help, and that might become an unsurmountable barrier. So that's another thing that needs to be changed. I think it is an absolutely political issue. We should therefore launch and organize international tenders, and that requires orchestration between the various nations. We do have the opportunities, technological opportunities. That's not the problem. And it is true that other countries have different sizes, dimensions, and numbers are different. But there should be political consistency. Otherwise, we cannot achieve these goals. And another issue to be dealt with is flexibility. Renewable of energy sources requires flexibility and security, safety and security of the network. We have the production of renewable energies, and flexibility should be important. And therefore, from this point of view, we should follow the Denmark's case, so that we have the development of energy dispatchment at the distribution level, not just at the transmission level, not central, but at a local level. That is something important. This is an enabler, so that we can therefore manage loads in a flexible and effective way without any imbalances in the grid at a higher level. And that is a contradiction as against Italy. Instead of going back to pump storage, that is a rigid system, whereas electrochemical storage batteries that are so much discussed about, since they are part of a whole system that is not directly linked to a specific niche, but is guided by electrical vehicles, that is scalable, because, for example, in Germany, they do encourage the installation of batteries on rooftops, but even more so, our company, we are forerunners for the use of batteries on cars as a piece of the grid. This is a vehicle-to-grid experiment that is being tried out in Denmark, and we recently started in the Netherlands. And thinking, therefore, of a car as a piece of an electrical grid is innovative but effective. In New York and the States, it is quite normal to use low voltage batteries to reduce peaks. And the New York distribution network uses batteries to receive a service to offset energy peaks. This is the future. And we have to work on that and invest on that. As for mobility, I've learned a lot today. I think that there is no doubt that we have to shift from gas to electric vehicles, cars. One of the weak points so far in Europe was a non-compliance of efficiency objectives, and and future goals can be achieved only if substantial radical changes occur. So electrical vehicles make the whole system efficient, and this goes without saying. It's a matter of fact. The fact that you have an efficiency of tens of points of yield between conventional and electric vehicles. If somebody talks about hydrogen, we believe that the market itself will decide innovation, technology, and rather than a top-down imposition from institutions and lawmakers in determining one scenario or the other one, but electric vehicles should necessarily be part of this whole chain as China is showing it to us.
Quindi, tornando un po' al tema di fondo, noi siamo convinti che in Europa...
So we are convinced that in Europe we were the forerunners and we have all the capabilities to be leaders. But the impression is that we are still moving about without any coordination, orchestration when you compare the various countries, and this is not enabling as a factor to achieve results. If we were the leaders, that is true, but we will now become the followers if we don't change our attitude, because the system-wide approach is the only way out. As for present results and future results towards a zero carbon economy that should be implemented from our point of view by 2050. Thank you, Mr. Pignoloni. We started from Europe and we got back to Europe. That is the truth. As blunt as that. This is the reality we have to deal with. So, having said that, I would like to thank all the various people, all the various panelists and listeners. And because this has been a very interesting morning, I would like to thank States General of Green Economies for giving us this opportunity. Let me say to you that all the various slide presentations can be downloaded from our website from tomorrow, statigenerali.org. Thank you all. See you next time. Thank you.